Before you listen, I want you to notice something familiar. The way memory feels solid until you examine it. The way details seem reliable until you try to place them in order. Most people assume awareness works like a recording, accurate, complete, preserved. But it doesn't. It edits. It omits. It fills gaps quietly, without permission. What you're about to hear is not about what I saw. It's about what remained consistent when everything else failed. Pay attention to what sounds routine. That's where the problem begins. Welcome to the Last Witness Files. We upload more interesting videos daily. Please subscribe if this story resonates with you. My name is Daniel R. Holloway. I am, or was at the time of the incident, an Alaska State Trooper assigned to the Western Alaska Patrol Region. I am making this statement after the conclusion of my active duty involvement in the case I'm about to describe. I'm recording this now because there is no formal channel left to submit it through, and because the record that should exist does not. This was not a classified case. It was not sensitive by designation. It did not involve national security, protected persons, or criminal organizations. On paper, it should have been routine. That is the first inconsistency. The assignment came through on a standard rotation night in late October. The timestamp on the call, as I remember it, was 22:43. Weather conditions were within operational norms for the season: low visibility, freezing fog, light wind. The report originated from a regional relay, flagged as a welfare check tied to an unreturned maintenance team operating near a decommissioned access route west of the Kuskokwim Range. There was nothing unusual about the wording. No urgency markers. No anomalies in the metadata. I acknowledged the call, logged my departure, and proceeded alone. That was standard. Backup was listed as optional due to the location and the presumed nature of the delay. According to procedure, I should have filed an arrival confirmation within 90 minutes. I did not. That omission appears nowhere, because the system shows no dispatch, no acknowledgement, and no gap. I want to be clear about something early. I am not describing confusion at the time. I was alert, oriented. I followed protocol. Every step felt sequential. There were no missing moments while I was experiencing them. The absence only appears when you try to reconstruct the timeline afterward. The access route in question was officially decommissioned 8 years prior due to erosion and repeated signal loss reports. It was still physically present in sections, but not maintained. I had been through adjacent areas before. The terrain was consistent: dense spruce, uneven rock shelves, limited sightlines. The fog was thicker than expected, but not abnormal. At approximately what I believed to be 0:11, I reached the last marked turnout before the route narrowed. My vehicle could not proceed further. I logged the stop manually, switched to foot patrol, and proceeded with standard equipment: flashlight, radio, sidearm, body recorder. The recorder was active. I know this because I checked the indicator twice. About 12 minutes in, I noticed the first deviation. The forest was quiet in a way that did not align with conditions. There was no wind movement in the canopy. No wildlife noise. This is not unusual in isolation, but it should not persist. It did. I attempted a routine radio check. The relay responded with a delayed acknowledgement. The voice was correct. The call sign was correct. The cadence was not. It was slower than standard, as if each word was being referenced before being spoken. I attributed this to signal degradation and continued. The maintenance team's last known coordinates placed them near an old survey marker. When I reached that location, there were signs of recent activity: compacted snow, equipment cases, a portable generator shut down properly. No sign of distress. No sign of departure. I performed a perimeter sweep. The sweep did not complete. I don't mean that I stopped. I mean the perimeter did not resolve. The distance between landmarks did not remain consistent. When I attempted to return to the generator, my path length exceeded the initial approach time by an unreasonable margin. I checked my compass. It functioned normally. I checked my GPS. It reported stationary movement despite my physical progress. This is where documentation should clarify events. It doesn't. The body recorder file exists. I have seen it. It begins mid-sentence. The timestamp resets twice. There is no visual anomaly. There is no sound distortion. What's missing is context. I am speaking in the recording as if continuing a report already in progress, but no earlier segment exists. In the recording, I describe observing something I have no memory of noticing for the first time. I refer to the area as already assessed. I mention returning again. Those words are mine. I recognize my voice. I don't recognize the experience they imply. At some point, I cannot accurately say when, I realized I was no longer navigating toward a location. I was navigating between repetitions. The same stand of trees appeared more than once, identifiable by a broken branch pattern and a partially exposed rock face. Each time, my approach felt initial. Each time, my report language suggested otherwise. I attempted to mark the area physically. I tied a strip of reflective tape to a branch at shoulder height. Later, I encountered the same branch without the tape. Later still, I encountered it with the tape already weathered, as if it had been there for days. I requested immediate extraction. The relay acknowledged. The acknowledgement used my name correctly. It did not reference my request. Instead, it asked me to confirm continuation. That phrase does not exist in standard protocol. I did not question it at the time. I confirmed. The maintenance team was never located. That is the official outcome, insofar as there is an official outcome. Their names exist in the employment database. Their dispatch does not. Their absence was processed as a clerical error corrected by reassignment. No missing persons case was opened. I was recovered at 6:18 by a routine aerial survey that reported spotting a stationary heat signature inconsistent with wildlife. I was standing upright near my vehicle, which had not moved from the turnout. I was facing the tree line. My equipment was intact. My recorder was active. According to the aerial crew, I did not respond to visual signals until addressed by name over an external speaker. When I turned, I appeared confused only briefly. I complied immediately. Here is the part that concerns me most. When I was debriefed, I was asked to summarize the incident. I did. The officer conducting the debrief nodded, typed notes, and thanked me. At the end, he asked me to sign the transcript. The transcript did not match what I said. It was close. Not wrong. Just aligned in a way that removed sequence. I asked to see the dispatch log. There was no entry. I asked to see the maintenance team file. It had been closed months earlier. I asked to review my own patrol record. The night in question was marked as leave. I have since learned not to phrase this as an error. Errors can be corrected. This feels maintained. I am recording this now because my own recollection is beginning to behave the same way. Certain details repeat without anchoring. Others fade despite relevance. The only consistent element is the awareness that something proceeded without being recorded, and that the absence is treated as resolution. This statement is not a request for action. It is not an accusation. It is a notice. If you find references to a similar patrol, a similar welfare check, or a similar decommissioned route that appears and disappears across reports, do not assume coincidence. Check the language. Listen for continuity where it shouldn't exist. I will not be submitting this through official channels again. I remained on active duty for 3 weeks following the incident. That period exists in my personnel file. What does not exist is any reference to restricted status, medical observation, or temporary reassignment. Nevertheless, my responsibilities during that time were limited to desk review and regional monitoring. I did not patrol. I did not receive field calls. No one explained the limitation. No one acknowledged it was happening. I noticed the change because my radio stayed active. It never left my possession. It transmitted. It received. It simply never addressed me directly. Calls routed through my channel carried identifiers intended for other troopers, often repeating segments, sometimes correcting themselves mid-transmission. When I acknowledged, the relay would pause, then resume as if nothing had been said. I documented this privately. Not in the system. On paper. Time, frequency, call sign, phrasing. The notes are consistent. The events they describe are not. The first repetition occurred during a routine weather advisory broadcast. The advisory looped 3 times without variation, then added a sentence that did not align with the rest of the message. It referenced a continuation zone. That phrase appeared nowhere else in the advisory network. When the loop ended, the relay reset and broadcast the original version again, without the added sentence. I contacted communications to report a possible relay malfunction. The technician I spoke to confirmed there was no anomaly logged. He asked me to repeat the phrase I'd heard. When I did, he paused, then asked if I was reading from a report. I said no. He thanked me and ended the call. That exchange does not appear in the call history. I attempted to access the body recorder file again. This time, I did not use my credentials. I requested the file through an internal review channel, citing a training audit. The response I received included the file, but not the same version I had seen before. The opening segment was different. The mid-sentence start remained, but the content preceding it now implied a longer duration on site than I remembered. The language was still mine. The phrasing was still consistent with my reporting style. The sequence was not. There is a point in the recording where I state, "This is the third pass." I do not elaborate. I do not sound concerned. I sound procedural. That sentence does not align with my memory, but it aligns with the physical evidence. Boot prints overlapping, tape weathering inconsistent with exposure time, generator cooling patterns suggesting multiple shutdowns. I began to consider the possibility that the incident had not occurred once. That it had occurred in segments that did not resolve linearly. This was not a conclusion I reached emotionally. It was a working hypothesis based on documentation behavior. The maintenance team names continued to surface in unrelated contexts. Not as missing persons. As schedule references. As completed tasks. As historical entries dated years earlier than their hiring. When I pointed this out to a supervisor, he scrolled through the file, nodded, and said, "That's not current." I asked him what current meant. He said, "Logged." I asked to review the decommissioned route file. The route existed. The erosion reports existed. The signal loss complaints existed. What did not exist were the closure justifications. The file showed a status change without rationale, approved by an office that no longer operates. The approval signature was legible. I recognized it. It belonged to a commander who retired before I joined the force. I began experiencing brief moments of spatial uncertainty in controlled environments. Hallways felt longer than measured. Stairwells repeated landings. These moments resolved quickly. I did not report them. They did not interfere with function. They did, however, mirror the pattern from the field: repetition without escalation, inconsistency without alarm. One evening, I received a direct call on my radio. The call sign used was mine. The voice was my own. It did not sound recorded. It sounded delayed. The message was simple: confirm position. I did not respond. The call repeated once, then shifted channels. I powered down the radio after that. When I powered it back on, it resumed normal traffic. No further direct calls occurred. The aerial crew that recovered me submitted their report late. When it was filed, it listed my location coordinates as variable. That field is not selectable in the reporting software. I know this because I have filled out the same report format. I asked the pilot about it. He said he didn't remember typing it. He said the report autofilled after submission. I requested a copy of my medical evaluation. It showed no abnormalities. The timestamps, however, overlapped with periods I was documented as working. According to the file, I was cleared twice, hours apart, by the same physician, who signed both entries with identical handwriting variations. I am not suggesting duplication. I am suggesting alignment. The system appears to reconcile inconsistencies by flattening them, not by resolving them. The final field interaction related to this case occurred when I was asked to accompany a training officer to review archived dispatch calls. The purpose was undefined. During the review, a call played that matched the cadence of my original welfare check assignment. Same timestamp format. Same phrasing. Different location. When I pointed this out, the training officer said, "That one doesn't go anywhere." I asked him what he meant. He rewound the call and played it again. This time, the call ended abruptly, mid-word. He frowned and said, "It's incomplete." I asked him why it was archived. He said, "Because it was closed." I asked how it was closed without resolution. He looked at me for a moment longer than necessary and said, "Some things close when they stop continuing." That phrasing appears nowhere in policy. I was placed on administrative leave shortly after. The reason given was unrelated. I did not contest it. I did not submit further reports. I did not pursue the missing documentation through formal means. What I did instead was monitor references, patterns, language drift. The most consistent indicator is not disappearance. It is substitution. Events are not erased. They are reassigned. Names persist without context. Locations persist without access. Calls persist without origin. If this were a malfunction, it would degrade. If it were interference, it would escalate. Instead, it stabilizes. I am documenting this because I have started to notice phrases in my own speech that I do not remember choosing. Procedural language where personal judgment should appear. Confirmations without requests. Continuations without beginnings. If this statement remains intact, it will be because it was never routed. If it disappears, it will not be sudden. It will be clean. That is how the first record was handled. I returned my issued equipment at the end of administrative leave. That process is logged. What is not logged is the delay between request and acceptance. According to the property system, the handover occurred immediately. In practice, I waited 3 days for authorization that never arrived but was later marked as completed. I was instructed verbally to leave the equipment secured until alignment cleared. That phrase was not clarified. During those 3 days, the radio activated twice without transmission prompts. It powered on without input, cycled channels, then powered down. The body recorder indicator remained inactive. The flashlight drained batteries without use. I replaced them once. The replacements drained at the same rate. I did not experience fear during this period. I want that stated clearly. The sensation was procedural inconvenience, not distress. The discomfort came later, when I realized that inconvenience was being treated as resolution. I was contacted by a regional records auditor 2 weeks after my leave ended. The call was professional, routine. She asked me to confirm whether I had completed a self-closure statement regarding an unresolved patrol activity. I told her I had not. She paused, then said the system showed I had, including a digital signature. She offered to forward a copy. The document she sent contained my name, badge number, and signature. The language was formal, concise, and consistent with departmental tone. It stated that I had determined the incident posed no ongoing risk and required no further action. It did not describe the incident. It did not name a location. It did not reference the maintenance team. It simply concluded continuation. I compared the signature to others I had filed. It matched. The pressure points were correct. The slant was correct. The timing was not. The signature timestamp placed me in 2 locations simultaneously. I asked the auditor to check the submission source. She said it was internal. I asked her what that meant. She said, logged without origin. After that exchange, I stopped using official systems entirely. I did not resign. I did not escalate. I withdrew. That decision was influenced by a growing awareness that engagement appeared to stabilize inconsistencies rather than expose them. The more something was reviewed, the more complete it became without becoming accurate. I began to experience what I can only describe as procedural anticipation. I would prepare to respond to events that had not yet occurred, using language appropriate to reports I had not written. When the events did occur, my responses aligned perfectly, as if rehearsed. This did not impair performance. It removed deliberation. The first time I noticed this clearly was during a civilian interaction unrelated to my role. A local contractor asked me if I had already checked the other side. I replied that I had, and that conditions were unchanged. Both statements were accurate, despite the fact that I had not consciously performed the check. When I later did, the conditions matched my response. This pattern extended to documentation. Notes I drafted privately contained references to actions I had not yet taken, written in past tense. When I reached those points later, the actions felt familiar, not anticipated. I returned once, unofficially, to the decommissioned route. Not to investigate. To observe whether observation itself altered anything. I parked at the same turnout. The snow cover was different. The tree line was not. The fog density matched my memory exactly. I walked no more than 50 meters before encountering the reflective tape. It was fresh, clean, untouched by weather. I had not placed it. I know this because I had no tape with me. I did not proceed further. I documented the location from a distance. When I reviewed the photos later, the tape did not appear. The branch did. The rock face did. The marker did not. I received a message the following day from a number I did not recognize. The message contained only coordinates. They matched the survey marker location from the original assignment. I did not reply. The message history shows my reply was sent. It reads, confirmed. The maintenance team names were officially removed from the employment database shortly after. Their entries were not deleted. They were reassigned to a legacy archive category reserved for dissolved contractors. That category requires a closure memo. The memo exists. It is unsigned. I contacted one of the team members' listed emergency contacts. The number connected. The person who answered did not recognize the name. She said she had received similar calls before and was told the association was residual. She asked me not to call again. The word residual appears frequently in contexts where explanation would normally follow. Residual access. Residual data. Residual continuity. It is never defined. It is treated as sufficient. I began to notice that when I avoided documenting something, it remained unstable. When I attempted to formalize it, it resolved incorrectly. This suggests that the system does not tolerate ambiguity. It converts it into closure using available patterns, regardless of fit. I do not believe the area itself was anomalous. I believe it was compatible. The route, the relay gaps, the decommissioning, all of it created a zone where continuation could occur without oversight. Once entered, the process did not require supervision to persist. I am aware of how this sounds. That awareness does not change the consistency of the indicators. I am not asserting intent. I am describing behavior. The most significant change occurred when I stopped thinking in terms of before and after. The incident does not sit in my memory as a past event. It behaves like an ongoing condition with variable access. Sometimes it is present. Sometimes it is archived. Sometimes it is referenced indirectly through unrelated procedures. If you are listening to this as a complete account, you should understand that completeness is the illusion here. The record feels full because it is self-correcting. Gaps are filled automatically. Contradictions are flattened. What remains is continuity without origin. I am continuing this statement because stopping appears to function as confirmation. I do not want to confirm. I want to mark persistence. If this set ends cleanly, that will be notable. The previous ones did not. I received notice of administrative closure through an automated portal I no longer had credentials to access. The message arrived as a system notification forwarded to my personal email, stripped of formatting and metadata. It stated that all matters related to my recent field activity had been reviewed and finalized. There was no case number. There was no summary. There was a confirmation button. I did not click it. The system marked it as acknowledged anyway. Following that notice, references to the incident began appearing in places they did not belong. Training bulletins cited resolved patrol deviations using phrasing identical to mine. A safety memo referenced a decommissioned route by a designation that had never been public. The designation matched the shorthand I used in my private notes. Those notes were never uploaded. I contacted a former colleague to ask if he had seen similar language. He said he hadn't. He said the bulletin had always read that way. When I sent him a screenshot from an archived copy, he said the wording looked correct, but he did not remember discussing it with me. He asked me why my name appeared in the footer as a reviewer. I told him I hadn't reviewed it. He said the system wouldn't allow that. At this point, I stopped attempting verification through people. Conversations created alignment. The more something was discussed, the more it appeared to have always been settled. Silence, however, did not erase references. It preserved them in a suspended state. I noticed changes in how time was recorded around me. Appointments concluded early without acknowledgement. Deadlines passed without consequence. When I attempted to revisit missed items, I was told they had already been addressed. This was not limited to professional contexts. Personal communications reflected the same pattern. Messages I did not send received replies. Calls I did not answer were logged as completed conversations. I am aware that this description risks being interpreted as cognitive impairment. I considered that possibility carefully. I sought independent evaluation outside institutional channels. The clinician I met with conducted a standard assessment and found no deficits. At the end of the session, he asked me if I wanted to close the loop. I asked him what he meant. He said it was a phrase I had used earlier. I reviewed my notes afterward. I had not. The phrase appeared in the clinician's summary. I attempted one final formal action. I submitted a public records request for any documentation related to patrol activity in the Kuskokwim region during the month of the incident. The response included hundreds of pages. None referenced my assignment directly. Several referenced a welfare check with identical parameters, time, weather, terrain, but listed a different trooper name each time. Each name belonged to someone who had transferred, retired, or died. The pattern suggested substitution rather than error. I did not pursue this further. Pursuit creates paths. Paths stabilize. The last direct contact I had from the department occurred during a routine benefits review. The representative thanked me for my service and confirmed my status as inactive. She asked me if I had any unresolved matters. I said yes. She asked me to describe them. I began to speak, then stopped. As I did, she said, "Those appear resolved." I asked her how she knew. She said, "They're no longer pending." I asked her what made them pending in the first place. She paused, then said, "Continuation." I have since avoided official terminology entirely. I do not use the word incident. I do not use case. I do not use closure. I refer to what happened as a condition. Conditions can persist without resolution. They can fluctuate. They can be managed without being explained. The condition has stabilized in recent months. References have decreased. My name appears less frequently in unrelated documentation. When it does appear, it is usually in historical contexts, as if my involvement predates me. I have learned not to correct this. Corrections invite updates. I still receive coordinates occasionally. Always the same. Always at night. I do not respond. The system records my response anyway. It always reads the same. Noted. I have returned to the area once more, this time without equipment, without documentation tools, without intent to observe. I stood at the turnout and did nothing. I did not proceed into the tree line. I did not activate a flashlight. I did not mark my presence. The fog remained at the edge of the road. It did not advance. This suggests that engagement is the trigger. Observation initiates continuation. Documentation sustains it. Silence delays it. I am not offering advice. I am stating behavior. This statement continues because it has not been routed. It remains external. If it enters a system, it will be reconciled. It will be aligned. It will be closed. I am aware that by speaking at all, I am creating a record. The difference is that this record is not required to make sense. It is allowed to remain incomplete. If you are hearing this, it means the condition has not yet resolved itself around this account. That window does not remain open indefinitely. I will continue as long as the structure allows. When it no longer does, there will not be an ending. There will be a confirmation. After the administrative closure, my access to departmental systems did not end immediately. It degraded. Certain portals rejected my credentials. Others accepted them but returned incomplete data. A few continued to function normally, as if my status had never changed. This inconsistency was not flagged. It was treated as expected behavior. I noticed that when access failed, it failed selectively. Case numbers resolved to summaries without attachments. Attachments resolved to metadata without content. Metadata resolved to timestamps without origin. Each layer existed independently. Together, they formed something that looked complete from a distance. I began mapping these layers manually, not to reconstruct the incident, but to observe how information behaved when it no longer had a stable anchor. Patterns emerged quickly. Anything associated with my name lost specificity over time. Anything associated with the location gained it. Coordinates became more precise. Environmental readings became more detailed. Human involvement became abstract. I reviewed public incident reports from the region going back 20 years. The decommissioned route appeared intermittently under different designations. Sometimes it was active. Sometimes it was restricted. Sometimes it did not exist. The shifts did not align with environmental data or policy changes. They aligned with personnel changes. Each time a trooper transferred out of the region, the route's status adjusted slightly, as if compensating. This suggested that the system was not correcting itself against reality, but against participation. When someone left, continuity redistributed. I contacted a retired dispatcher who had worked the region longer than anyone else I knew. I asked her if she remembered the route. She said she remembered it being difficult. I asked her what that meant. She said calls from that area rarely finished cleanly. They either dropped or resolved without clear outcome. She said supervisors used to joke that the place filed itself. When I asked her if she remembered my assignment, she said she remembered my voice. She did not remember a call. She said that sometimes voices came through without identifiers, already mid-report. Those transmissions were logged as training artifacts and archived automatically. I asked her why. She said because they had no start. The condition began to affect my personal record-keeping. Journals lost entries. Calendars shifted appointments. Photos taken during the period displayed correct timestamps but incorrect sequencing. A photo taken later appeared earlier in the roll, always near images of forested terrain, even when the content was unrelated. I tested this by taking a series of controlled photos, urban environment, clear lighting, identifiable landmarks. When reviewed later, the sequence was intact. When I inserted a single image of tree cover at night, taken from a different location entirely, the order changed. The forest image repositioned itself closer to the incident timeframe, despite metadata to the contrary. This behavior suggests that classification overrides chronology. I attempted to disengage entirely. I stopped recording observations. I stopped reviewing archives. I avoided the subject in conversation. For a period, this worked. The references slowed. The coordinates stopped arriving. The language drift stabilized. Then I received a mailed envelope with no return address. Inside was a single printed page. It was a dispatch transcript fragment. No header. No footer. Just dialogue. My voice, mid-report. Describing environmental conditions I recognized but could not place. The fragment ended with a line, continuing on foot. The paper showed no signs of age. The print quality was modern. There were no fingerprints. The envelope had been sealed recently. I did not destroy it. I did not keep it. I left it on a public bench in a transit station. When I returned the next day, it was gone. Following that, I began noticing subtle prompts in unrelated systems. Online forms auto-filled fields with my badge number. Mapping software suggested routes that passed near the decommissioned access point, regardless of destination. Weather alerts referenced microclimates that only existed in that valley. These prompts were not intrusive. They were optional. They resembled conveniences. I want to emphasize that nothing compelled me to return. There were no threats, no escalation, no deterioration. The pressure was procedural, not emotional. A sense that something remained open, not because it demanded attention, but because it was designed to persist until acknowledged again. I resisted that pressure by refusing acknowledgement. I did not confirm. I did not deny. I allowed prompts to expire. When they did, the system often logged them as addressed. This led me to a working conclusion. Closure does not require participation. It requires absence. When a participant disengages completely, the system resolves around the gap using substitutes. When a participant remains partially engaged, the gap stays active. That is why my name continues to appear. Not because I am required, but because I am present enough to prevent substitution. I have taken steps to reduce that presence. I no longer carry identifying documents. I do not use my full name in transactions. I avoid systems that rely on persistent identifiers. This has reduced references significantly. However, the location remains active. The route continues to surface in documents tied to other people. Welfare checks that never escalate. Maintenance delays that resolve themselves. Training examples with no source. This suggests that the condition is not personal. It is structural. Certain places allow continuation without oversight. Once identified, they remain available. I am continuing this statement now because I received another transcript fragment yesterday. This one included a timestamp. It matched the original call time exactly. The location field was blank. The trooper identifier field contained my name, followed by a question mark. That punctuation matters. It indicates uncertainty within a system that does not tolerate it. I do not know how long that uncertainty can persist. Systems tend to resolve ambiguity aggressively. They substitute. They align. They close. If this account ends abruptly, it will not be because I stopped. It will be because something else was inserted to replace it. Until that happens, I will continue to speak from outside the structure. That is the only position from which this condition remains observable. The forest does not require witnesses. The system does. I am no longer listed as an active or inactive trooper in any public-facing registry. My name persists only in archival layers that do not surface unless queried indirectly. This has reduced direct contact, but it has not ended reference. Instead, references now appear detached, as if searching for reassignment. I learned this after receiving a voicemail addressed to no one. The greeting field was blank. The message began mid-sentence, already in progress. It described a welfare check briefing using language consistent with current protocol, but it did not specify a recipient. The closing line was, "Proceed when available." The system marked the message as listened to before I accessed it. I did not delete the voicemail. I did not save it. When I checked again later, it was no longer present. The call log shows no incoming call. The timestamp remains. The frequency of these unassigned references has increased. They do not ask for confirmation. They do not escalate. They simply persist until acknowledged or absorbed elsewhere. When I ignore them, they migrate. When I attempt to trace them, they stabilize briefly, then dissolve. I have continued monitoring public safety bulletins, not for content, but for linguistic anomalies. Certain phrases recur in contexts where they are not operationally necessary. Proceed as appropriate. No further action required. Conditions unchanged. These phrases often appear without preceding justification. They function as closures without openings. I compared these bulletins across regions. The pattern is not universal. It clusters around specific terrain profiles, remote access routes, decommissioned infrastructure, low population coverage zones. Areas where oversight is intermittent and continuity relies on assumption rather than verification. I contacted an analyst who specializes in incident trend aggregation. I did not mention my case. I asked him how unresolved reports are typically handled when they lack escalation markers. He said they are usually reviewed manually. I asked what happens when manual review does not occur. He said the system resolves them statistically, based on comparable outcomes. I asked him what outcomes those models favor. He said closures. This explains the substitutions. When an event cannot be resolved directly, it is resolved by similarity. Another trooper's name. Another location. Another time frame. The system does not need accuracy. It needs completion. I believe my continued presence interferes with that process. As long as I remain associated with the original parameters, substitution remains uncertain. The question mark appended to my name in the transcript fragment supports this. It is a placeholder awaiting resolution. I have considered removing myself entirely, changing names, relocating permanently, severing all procedural identifiers. That would likely result in a clean substitution. The record would finalize without me. I would be archived. I have not done this yet because I want to observe what happens when uncertainty persists longer than designed. Systems are built to handle anomalies briefly. Prolonged ambiguity forces adaptation. That adaptation leaves traces. Those traces are becoming visible now. I recently reviewed a training simulation released last month. It depicted a nighttime welfare check in a mountainous forest region. The scenario ended without contact. The trainee was instructed to file a closure report citing environmental limitations. The location coordinates used in the simulation matched the decommissioned route within a margin too narrow to be coincidental. The scenario was presented as fictional. I contacted the training division to ask where the scenario originated. They said it was generated automatically from historical data. When I asked which data, they said the source file was unavailable but marked as resolved. I am mentioned nowhere in the simulation. The voice used in the audio briefing, however, matches my cadence exactly. Not my voice sprint, my pacing. The pauses. The phrasing. The procedural neutrality. This indicates that substitution is already occurring, but incompletely. Elements of the original record are being abstracted rather than replaced. I have started receiving correspondence addressed to responding officer. No name. No badge number. The content mirrors my original assignment language. The system appears to be testing reassignment without committing to it. I do not respond to these messages. When I don't, they expire and reappear elsewhere. A bulletin, a memo, a simulation. Each instance removes more specificity. The most recent development occurred 3 nights ago. I received coordinates again. This time, they were accompanied by an additional line, no unit assigned. That phrasing confirms my suspicion. The event is still active. It has not been closed. It has not been reassigned successfully. It is waiting for a participant. I will not return to the site. Not because it is dangerous, but because presence would complete the loop. Observation would trigger continuation. Documentation would sustain it. Closure would finalize it incorrectly. By remaining external, I prevent substitution without enabling resolution. This keeps the condition exposed. I am aware that this position is not stable indefinitely. Eventually, either I will disengage fully, or the system will adapt around me. When that happens, the record will complete itself. It will appear orderly. It will appear resolved. When it does, no one will notice the difference. The maintenance team will have always completed their task. The patrol will have always ended uneventfully. The route will have always been appropriately classified. Only this account will remain inconsistent. If it remains accessible. I am continuing now because continuation without assignment is still possible here. This format does not require validation. It does not auto-close. It does not substitute. If that changes, the tone will not. There will be no escalation. There will be no revelation. There will simply be an ending that feels administrative. That is how this will conclude if allowed to conclude at all. The longer this condition persists, the more clearly its boundaries become defined. It does not expand. It does not escalate. It waits. That waiting is structured. It adheres to procedural expectations even when no procedure applies. This makes it difficult to distinguish from routine administrative delay, which is likely why it remains tolerated. I have reviewed similar cases indirectly by examining how unresolved events are categorized over extended periods. Most degrade into inactivity. They lose priority, then visibility, then reference. This one does not. It maintains a minimal presence across systems without consolidating into a single file. That distribution prevents review. There is nothing complete enough to audit. I received confirmation of this behavior during an unrelated interaction with a municipal clerk. I was requesting a copy of a public land use permit. The clerk typed my name, paused, and asked me if I was still attached. I asked her to clarify. She said the system showed my name associated with a geographic marker, but not with an active record. She said it happened occasionally with decommissioned projects. She asked me if I wanted to detach. I asked her what detachment involved. She said it was a checkbox. She said once detached, the marker would be reassigned automatically. She said it would close within a week. I declined. After that interaction, references increased briefly, as if responding to the possibility of resolution. The coordinates arrived twice in one night. A weather alert referenced the valley specifically. A public safety notice included a line stating, "No responding unit required." That line was later removed without revision notice. I have become careful about language. Certain words function as triggers. Confirm. Proceed. Continue. Acknowledge. These words appear neutral, but they initiate sequence. I avoid them. When I cannot, I phrase responses passively. Observed. Noted. Received. Even then, systems often translate passivity into action. This suggests that intent is not required. Participation is inferred. I tested this by deliberately submitting incomplete information through a public feedback form. I described a hypothetical issue near the route without naming it. The response thanked me for my report and stated that the matter had already been addressed. No investigation occurred. No follow-up was requested. The system treated the absence of specificity as confirmation of closure. This reinforces my conclusion that ambiguity is resolved by assumption, not inquiry. I have not experienced any further spatial anomalies. Hallways no longer repeat. Distances remain stable. This supports the idea that the original environment was permissive, not causal. The behavior follows classification, not geography alone. When a place is categorized as unresolved but non-critical, it becomes available for procedural drift. The maintenance team remains the most conspicuous absence. Their records exist in fragments across multiple databases, each fragment complete within itself, none connected. Employment history without assignment. Equipment logs without issuance. Payroll entries without disbursement. This fragmentation prevents any single office from noticing the inconsistency. I attempted one final contact with a records office, framing the inquiry as a data hygiene concern. I asked how orphaned records are typically handled. The response stated that orphaned records are merged during periodic reconciliation cycles. I asked what happens if reconciliation fails. The response stated that unresolved merges are marked as legacy and excluded from active review. Legacy is a form of closure. I have accepted that this condition will not be resolved through exposure. Systems do not correct themselves when observed. They correct themselves when pressured to complete. Pressure can come from inquiry, from participation, or from time. I cannot control the last factor indefinitely. What I can control is my role. I will not act as the missing participant. I will not confirm the loop. I will not provide the final data point that allows substitution to finalize. If the system resolves anyway, it will do so without me. That resolution will be clean. It will be documented. It will be archived. It will be referenced in training materials and policy updates. It will appear ordinary. When that happens, the only indication that something was different will be the absence of a beginning. The record will start in the middle, already underway, already framed as continuation. Most people will not notice. They rarely do. This statement is approaching the limits of its usefulness. Not because it is inaccurate, but because persistence itself attracts classification. Already, the language I use is beginning to echo phrases I have seen elsewhere. That is how alignment begins. I will continue for now, but with restraint. The goal is not to be heard. The goal is to remain unassigned. If you are listening to this and you recognize similar patterns in your own work, reports that resolve without review, cases that close without decision, do not assume efficiency. Efficiency leaves traces. This leaves substitutions. There is a difference. I am documenting this because once substitution completes, there will be no reference point left to compare against. Everything will look correct. At that point, silence will not be resistance. It will be confirmation. Until then, this remains pending. The transition into provisional status was not announced. I inferred it from behavior. References to the condition became less frequent but more formal. Where earlier mentions appeared as fragments or prompts, newer ones arrived packaged as summaries. Not full reports. Abstracts. Enough to justify existence without inviting scrutiny. I first noticed this shift when a public safety review document cited historical patrol variants in the Kuskokwim region. The phrase was unfamiliar, but the structure was recognizable. Variance implies deviation without fault. Historical implies completion. Together, they suggest a past event no longer actionable. My name did not appear in the document. A trooper identifier was listed as unassigned. The location coordinates were approximate rather than exact. This reduction in precision is significant. It indicates that substitution is nearing completion. Specificity is no longer required. I contacted no one about this. Inquiry would accelerate reconciliation. Instead, I monitored how the abstract propagated. Within days, the same phrasing appeared in a risk assessment model used for resource allocation. The model adjusted patrol frequency in the region downward, citing documented low incident yield. This was based on data that never resolved into a single event. The system had begun to treat absence as outcome. I received one final transcript fragment during this period. It was shorter than the others. 3 lines only. No timestamps. No identifiers. The content was procedural and generic. Area assessed. No contact made. Conditions unchanged. Those lines could apply to any number of patrols. That is their function. They allow reassignment by generalization. I did not attempt to trace the fragment's origin. Its existence was confirmation enough. Shortly after, the coordinates stopped arriving. Weather alerts no longer referenced the valley specifically. Mapping software ceased suggesting the access route. The condition was being absorbed into baseline. This is how systems end things without endings. They reduce resolution until nothing remains distinct. I tested this by searching public archives for the maintenance team. Their names still appeared, but now as footnotes in aggregated labor statistics. No individual records. No dates. No employers. Just counts. This is substitution at scale. Individual absence converted into population-level noise. I want to note that during this phase, I experienced no anomalies. No repeated phrases. No unsolicited prompts. My personal records remained stable. This indicates that the system no longer required my partial engagement. It had found a path forward without me. That path did not correct the original inconsistency. It bypassed it. I am aware that from an external perspective, this may appear as resolution. The patrol did not escalate. No bodies were found. No distress signals were confirmed. The route remains decommissioned. Risk models adjusted accordingly. Everything aligns. What does not align is the absence of decision. No one chose this outcome. It emerged. I am continuing this statement because provisional archives are not final. They remain accessible until overwritten by updated classifications. If a similar event occurs in the same region, the abstract may be reactivated, refined, or replaced. At that point, the pattern could repeat. That is the risk of unresolved structures. They persist as templates. I have taken steps to ensure this account remains external to those templates. I have avoided institutional language. I have resisted summarization. I have not provided closure statements. This preserves the record as an outlier. Outliers are not reconciled easily. However, I recognize that persistence itself can trigger archival pressure. At some point, even this format may be categorized. When that happens, it will be labeled anecdotal, non-actionable, or resolved by absence of corroboration. I accept that outcome. My goal was never to force correction. It was to mark divergence. If you are hearing this as part of a complete series, understand that completeness is coincidental. The structure allowed continuation long enough for observation. It will not allow it indefinitely. There will be no final revelation. No recovered evidence. No acknowledgement from authority. The system does not respond to contradiction. It responds to silence and time. This account will end not because something happens, but because nothing else does. When it does, the remaining abstract will be sufficient for all operational purposes. Patrols will continue. Routes will remain classified appropriately. Training simulations will reference historical variance. No one will ask why that variance exists. That is how provisional archives work. They remember just enough to justify forgetting the rest. This is my final observation while the condition remains visible. Any continuation beyond this point would risk becoming the abstract it resists. I will stop here. This is the final segment I am recording while the condition remains distinguishable from its surroundings. The shift from provisional archive to end state is subtle. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself through absence of friction. Systems no longer hesitate. References no longer require adjustment. Everything proceeds as if alignment was always present. I became aware of this transition when a regional oversight report was released summarizing multi-year patrol efficiency trends. The report included a brief section on historical anomalies that had been fully reconciled through procedural normalization. That phrase is deliberately vague. It signals that whatever could not be resolved through investigation has been resolved through categorization. The decommissioned route was listed once, without emphasis, under infrastructure notes. No anomalies. No history. Just a status. The maintenance team was not referenced at all. The patrol activity that initiated this condition was represented as a non-event, an entry that began and ended within the same line. This is the final form of substitution. Not replacement, but compression. I searched for my name in the document. It did not appear. I searched for variants. Nothing. I searched for language patterns unique to my reporting style. They were present, distributed across unrelated sections, diluted beyond attribution. At this stage, direct contradiction is no longer possible. There is nothing concrete enough to oppose. The system has not erased the incident. It has rendered it indistinguishable from routine background noise. I want to clarify something important. This outcome does not require intent. No individual chose to remove anything. No office decided to conceal anything. The structure behaved as designed. When faced with persistence that could not be resolved through evidence, it resolved through abstraction. That is why there will be no correction. Corrections require an error state. This has become a completed process. I tested the stability of this end state by making a single, minimal inquiry through a public channel. I referenced the route by its original designation and asked whether it had ever been associated with repeated patrol activity. The response was brief. It stated that the route had been assessed multiple times historically and found to require no ongoing attention. The inquiry was marked resolved automatically. No further data was offered. None was required. I am no longer receiving coordinates. No fragments arrive. No language drift appears in unrelated systems. My personal records remain static. From an operational standpoint, this condition is over. What remains is not evidence, but pattern memory. The understanding of how easily continuation can replace explanation when oversight is fragmented and time is allowed to operate without review. I am aware that continuing to speak now risks retroactive classification. Even this statement could be reframed as commentary, anecdote, or narrative rather than record. That is acceptable. Records only matter if they can interrupt process. This one cannot anymore. If you are listening to this expecting a conclusion, understand that conclusions are administrative conveniences. They signal that attention is no longer required. What happened here did not conclude. It normalized. The forest remains unchanged. The route remains inaccessible. Patrols pass nearby without incident. Maintenance teams are scheduled and complete their work elsewhere. Nothing draws focus. That is the most reliable indicator that substitution is complete. I have no recommendation to offer. There is no procedural fix for structures that prioritize completion over accuracy. The only meaningful resistance is awareness, and awareness fades when not reinforced. This account exists to mark that something proceeded without decision, and that the absence of decision was accepted as outcome. That may not concern most people. It should concern those who work inside systems that rely on continuity as proof of correctness. I am ending the statement now not because I have reached certainty, but because uncertainty is no longer tolerated by the surrounding structure. Further continuation would not preserve clarity. It would be absorbed. If this recording remains accessible, it will do so because it was never required to align. If it disappears, it will do so quietly, without notification, without trace. That will not be an error. It will be confirmation. My name is Daniel R. Holloway. I was an Alaska State Trooper. This case was never logged, and now it no longer needs to be.